Dr. Paul Zak, welcome to Dad Saves America.
Thank you so much, John.
So, Paul, you reached out to me over email with a really interesting study that I'm excited for us to talk about. But I was excited to just see your name pop up because I saw you give a presentation about your work in neurobiology 15 years ago at an event that frankly was like the change point in my life. This was an event put on by a mutual friend or acquaintance, perhaps Stephen Hassler, basically exploring the intersection of free enterprise and faith, and it was in Arizona. I met investors who would ultimately help me start Emergent Order, and it transformed my life. And so I always look back to that event where I saw you give a presentation about oxytocin, the trust hormone, the love molecule, and just think of it fondly. So welcome to the show.
It's great to be back with you. Yeah, and I followed what you've been doing all this time. So thank you.
So let's just start with, gosh, there's so many good places to start with you. What are you up to right now? Because you're one of the few people I've met over the years who actually connects neuroscience and biology to economics. And because it seems like a lot of the study of human behavior that economics is a part of, along with psychology, sociology, often doesn't look at the biology, doesn't look at the brain, doesn't look at the way the brain may or may not change. You're in a very special niche that seems like it should be bigger than it is. So what has captivated you right now?
I think really the arc of my work has been creating knowledge and technology so that people can live longer, happier, and healthier lives. And a lot of that has to do with the quality of our social relationships. And, if you ask me, or if I ask you, what's the quality of your social relationship? How many people are in my phone? I mean, it's a very hard question to answer. But by understanding the neurobiological foundations for social connection, for social interaction, how that reflects on our health and thriving, we have a way to objectively measure and therefore improve and act on these kinds of findings.
I want to get into all the different pieces of that, but I want to start with a somewhat skeptical question in the sense that there's a phenomenon that I understand in medicine, which is that we somewhat over measure things, and it results in interventions medically that are often pretty high risk and tend to, on average, do more harm than good. So when you think about measuring something like the sort of biological underpinnings of our behavior and our relationships, how do you know, or how do you keep yourself aware of where measurement can be a problem?
First of all, you said my favorite word, skeptic. So I'm skeptical about everything, and by personality and by training, we're skeptical. So A plus. So you're already in my happy book. Yeah, I think I've been very concerned about that, and we've developed technologies to go around that. So first of all, once we measure, the nice thing about most neurobiological systems is you can manipulate them. So, for example, pharmacologically. So I can say, oh, we find oxytocin is related to something, and then, hey, I can manipulate oxytocin pharmacologically and see if that changes behavior. So I can actually map that causal relationship. And so that helps us solve that. But it's still a one-to-one mapping, and nothing in the brain works one-to-one. So we, over the last, I don't know, 12, 15 years, with, by the way, funding from DARPA and a bunch of, three-letter agencies, have measured hundreds of signals or 150 signals simultaneously from the brain and peripheral nervous system and basically put them in a big blender and ask, which of these consistently predict people's behavior? So I'm a behavior guy and a mechanism guy. I want to know the mechanism producing that behavior. If I know the mechanism, then I can ask, how might I change that mechanism's action? Through having you watch a video or talking to you or pharmacologically, lots of ways of doing it. So I think, if I could say one more thing, John, I think the dirty secret in neuroscience is that averages are not very meaningful, right? So
Really?
I
Yeah,
get
tell me
brain
about that. What do you
activity.
mean?
Yeah, so I give people a task in the lab, and we're measuring brain activity in some way, and um, people are doing the same task, but we'll see for 50 people, five, six, seven different patterns of brain activity. Now I can average that down into an average, but really we're talking about the variety of the human experience. So even though you're doing the same thing, your brain is actually processing this in a different way, and this makes me very skeptical of things like behavioral nudges that work on average, but may not be very applicable to people who are more in the tails of the distribution.
Okay, I'll keep this quick. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so that you won't miss more Dad Saves America as our videos come out each week. And it also really helps us because when we reach out to guests, they look at how many subscribers there are to decide if they want to come on and share their ideas. So please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And thanks for watching. Now, back to the show. So that's interesting because so much of economic interventionism involves something like that. It involves a sense that there's an incentive that if you turn the knob, you get outcome X. And is it Cass Sunstein who had first done this? Maybe not first, but he's part of this realm of nudging, of libertarian paternalism was the term. Well, for example, let's just change the default. So at your employer, you're automatically opted into your 401k, and that's a nudge in the direction of what you probably actually want, but don't do for reasons that smarty pants professors know better than the average person about. Mm-hmm. Dive deeper into that skepticism on the nudgers, because I want to hear more from your perspective on that for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my 2020 book called Immersion, I had a whole chapter on the ethics of persuasion. Like, as what social creatures do, we persuade people all the time, right? Like you, I've been married 30 years. I'm still trying to persuade my wife to stay married to me and be nice to me. And, she might just get sick of me at some point. So I have to be nice to her, right? So I think nudges that are hidden are bad or evil, right? If you don't know you're being nudged, but you're just being pushed in this direction, then you can't actually say no. And the whole point of libertarian paternalism is to have the option to opt out. And I think now, like the British have this, nudge unit that's still active, that's basically putting hidden nudges in all the time. Now, marketers are doing this as well, let's be honest, right? Yeah. So, but we expect it from marketers. We probably don't expect it from government or other institutions that are supposed to be at least neutral, if not, hopefully making people's lives better. So again, I think the if you're moving a lot of people on the average, maybe not so bad, but I'd like to have this transparency over the nudge so I can say no.
What for someone that isn't familiar at all with what we understand about the causality of the brain, like the things that we believe, you mentioned sort of, you have these things that have a causal relationship. Oh, we can give this drug and it leads to these kinds of changes in some way that's sort of predictable. Or oxytocin, increased oxytocin leads to this kind of behavior change. What is the state of what we know about like that kind of mechanism with the brain? Like, the brain's crazy. It's like people lose large sections of their brain and restore enough of their function that it's like, wait, what was all of that part of the brain for if you were able to readjust? So maybe set a baseline on kind of what the state of neuroscience is.
Yeah, that's a big question. Let me try to take a couple swipes at it. So if, God forbid, you had a stroke and you couldn't lift your left arm, I can tell you exactly where that stroke happened because those are strongly conserved across individuals. But why you like chocolate ice cream and I like vanilla, not at all clear. And so those are fairly complicated interactions between genes, your developmental history, what you're used to as a kid, and then your current physiologic state. And so that's a really complicated mapping that I think we haven't worked out very carefully. We have some senses, but for example, variety seeking. Mm-hmm. Even if I like vanilla ice cream, sometimes I get chocolate. What's that about?
Yeah.
So again, for me, I'm an economics apostate. I think that if you sit in your office and write down a mathematical model that explains people's behavior, you're an insane person. As opposed to observing humans, and for me, measuring the mechanism, the brain activity, and saying, oh, here's actually the variety of the human experience. And if I tweak this a little bit with a drug or some other stimulus, we use videos a lot, as you know. I show you a video, I can change your behavior a lot. Even this early work by Dan Ariely, where you just write down the last 2 digits of your social security number, and all of a sudden, you're making a monetary decision, and that anchoring on that random anchoring just changes your behavior. So the I think the punchline here is that this deep view in economics that you know your own preferences and they are stable is not consistent with the neuroscience. We're being bounced around all the time, and we have habits that we establish because they're very metabolically efficient in the brain to do the same thing over and over. So I buy Tide laundry detergent. I don't know why. Always seems to work for me. I don't even look at the price. I mean, if the price tripled, probably I'd pay attention. But I'm just buying Tide. I don't even know why. I have no idea, right? So that's habitual behavior, and that's super efficient. I have to sit there and, cogitate and work out some price benefit and the cost per ounce. That's too slow. So economists kind of think you would do that, but that would be silly, and only a weirdo would do that.
So this sort of begs one question about the human, about what we are and how we choose, that is in a word that we use that I'm really curious your take on, and that is rational. Are we rational? So we're talking about these nudgers, and the biggest picture of that, as I understand it, would be something like behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman, these kind of folks that say, oh, we've got all these sort of irrationalities where, hey, I want to lose weight, and yet I keep eating sweets, no, even though I know that contributes to me gaining weight, but I like it, so I do it anyway. And then I wake up and I look in the mirror and I feel bad about myself, and then I go eat more chocolate. Guilty as charged. So that seems irrational. How do you think about what the idea of rationality is, and like where can we apply rationality, and where is it a misused word?
I think we are rationally rational in the sense that when there's an important decision, if you're going to buy a company, if you're going to invest in a company, if you have time, you can do due diligence, you can get expert opinion. That makes a lot of sense. For me, buying laundry detergent, I don't need to optimize. I don't need to be the most rational person in the world, because there's no reason that the benefit of me spending that amount of time is not high enough. So by that I mean the brain itself is an economic system. There are scarce resources. Those resources can be depleted, and I only want to expend them on those experiences, activities that are sufficiently valuable to me. So in work over the last 15 years, my lab identified how we value social emotional experiences. So emotions are how the brain tags something with importance. So this valuation network, which I've called immersion, a combination of a bunch of signals in the brain, it's this time series, and it wants to be flat because that saves energy. It's your brain burns about 30% of the calories you take in, so it's really energy hungry. So I just want to cruise. So in economics, they would call that fat indifference curves. For a range of stimuli, you just do the same thing. Why recreate the wheel? It's too cognitively expensive. Unless you're really missing, something that, what you're doing is maladaptive. You're really missing an outcome here. So for normal life, we shouldn't be rational from a neuroscience perspective, in the sense that I want to optimize every decision I make. There are people who do that, and that generally they have OCD, right? So that's kind of an OCD behavior.
Okay.
Where you're spending so much energy on just like, what road should I take? Like, I don't, just let GPS tell you. It doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's like you've got one of our producers here, Jesse, said that she said that her brother does competitive chess, and that he, over the course of a championship, would lose weight. That's how much calorie use that intense brain activity causes. When you say that the brain uses 30% of our calories, that's actually crazy to hear.
Right.
Yeah. Well, how do you know that? How do you know how many calories the brain is using relative to other stuff?
I have no idea. I mean, it's just in the published literature. But I mean, you can actually look at neural firing rates, right, and relate that to caloric, burning calories. So it's not my work, but it is very costly, and so that's why I think having good habits are really important. And we have like institutions that try to do that, and we have a bunch of factors that put us in the sort of optimal performance level. So, for example, coaches for sports. So with children, have you, like your son, Coach, you can't bully your own kids. It's kind of mean, but your coach can bully your kids, and that's pushing them to higher performance, right? And teachers and professors who are good will kind of bully or push you to higher performance, right? This is going to be a hard class. You're going to have to put in 5 hours, a study for every hour you're in class. If you're not, or otherwise you're not going to pass it. That's kind of bullying, but pushing you to that high performance. So that moderate stress is actually really good for your brain. It improves performance. This is 100-year-old research called the Yerkes-Dodson law. So under moderate stress, I actually improve my decision making. So again, for listeners, sorry, too much information. If it's important, you're going to invest those calories to make a better decision. And if you're not sure what to do, your brain consolidates information during sleep. So literally sleeping on it helps you put everything in context, and then you can make a better decision. So any big decision, buying a car, buying a house, getting married, getting divorced, at least sleep on it once.
So I want to try to. We can go in so many different directions, and I've already pulled us around really quickly. So to think about how to dive into some of the things you've talked about over the years and wrote about, I think of it in a couple different categories. So as it pertains to sort of your work and the brain and the challenges of our times, because I feel like we are in very like cognitively demanding, crazy times that I think are expressing themselves, especially with our kids and Gen Z, as heightened levels of distress, of psychological distress, of that's also the relationship distress that younger generations are under is really worrisome to me, and so let's start there. So your TED talk from, I think it was 13 years ago, talks about the love hormone, oxytocin. For people who don't know what this is and never heard of it, what is oxytocin? What do you know about it? Why is it important to know about this hormone that seems to matter a lot more than one would think when you hear it described?
Right. I'm just going to fix the question just a little bit. So I'm not interested in hormones. I'm interested in neurochemicals. So oxytocin, like most neurochemicals in the body, works in the peripheral nervous system called a hormone and in the brain. So the kind of innovation we made was to measure oxytocin in the brain and show its behavioral effects. And so, one of the things that interests both you and me, John, is why do we ever see good behavior?
Mm-hmm.
When no one's looking? Again, if nature is red in tooth and claw, why not just steal stuff, kill people all the time? You might get caught, but there's so much good behavior that people don't observe. And I had shown in some research in the early 2000s or late 90s that interpersonal trust was among the strongest predictors of whether a country was rich or poor that social scientists have ever found. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, they all trust each other. And so it's easy to do deals and create wealth because I can just shake hands. Maybe a lawyer writes something down, but ultimately we got to shake hands and decide to do a deal. And so, well, why is that the case? So I characterize the kind of environments, social environment and political environment and informal relationships that drive high or low trust. But I would always get this question, like, well, why do two strangers in a given environment ever trust each other?
Right.
Actually, that's a deep question, really deep question. And so what we showed running experiments and then doing lots of other stuff over 20 years is that this neurochemical in animals that tells us that someone around us or tells another animal is either familiar, a family member, or someone safe to be around, or something safe to be around, is actually active in humans. So we had to create a protocol to measure this acute release of this neurochemical from the brain. In animals, you have to drill into the skull to get that. I don't know a lot about humans, but I thought that's probably not going to be cool for running human experiments. And then we were the first to infuse synthetic oxytocin into the human brain through the nose and show that we can causally increase trust in strangers in a quantifiable way. Not just do you trust it, but putting money on the table, real money. And so we subsequently showed that oxytocin is a core signal of a desire to engage socially and to actually benefit other people. So, for example, we've run experiments looking at various rituals. We're all involved in rituals all the time. And in these rituals, we put like a green badge or a red badge on you. We didn't say anything, so you're in the green team or the red team. Had you do a ritual with your team, But if that ritual caused you to release oxytocin, then when you have a chance to share money with other people, you're shared equally with your team and the other team. Where if you don't have that oxytocin release, then of course you're going to benefit your in team because, I don't know, they're your group, they're your people, even if it's just randomly assigned. So it kind of think of oxytocin as melting that self-other divide. And that's one of the most beautiful things I think in human life is that we can just accept strangers right into our social group or even our families and just treat them like family members. And, think of, we're old enough that, I have dear guy friends that I tell them I love them, and I do. They're like brothers.
Yeah.
That's an amazing freaking thing, right? That, of course, my family loves me. I mean, I hope they do. But, that you have 2 or 3 or 4 amazing guy friends that you've kind of been through some crazy stuff with. You're like, I can trust this guy with my life. Like, this is an amazing kind of thing. And that comes from this strong signaling that establishes this pathway in the brain that goes, oh, this person will take care of you if you need it. It's always going to be there for you.
So, if I remember correctly, I think the first time I heard about oxytocin release, and it might be the thing that people tend to hear about, is that it's a bonding hormone, or that it is released as part of breastfeeding, and that it's one of the things that like connects a mother to their child.
Right.
Is that right? And is that where where people first started to realize that this is what was going on?
Yeah, it's really a mammalian chemical that it's actually Greek for quick birth. So it pushes out, squeezes the uterus to push out mammal babies, then facilitates milk letdown. And so that kind of caring that is indicative of mammals caring for offspring is driven largely by oxytocin. But then the sort of mystery was, well, do men's brains make this too? What about when you don't have little babies at home? What is it? Does it matter? Does it not matter? So we showed us that almost any positive social stimulus, me holding the door for you as you walk in an office building, will cause your brain to release oxytocin. What that does is reduces that stress level, which allows us as humans to live around complete strangers and actually enjoy that. Like, think of the conferences, you and I go to.
Yeah.
Like, you meet all these crazy people. Maybe you're giving a talk, people like hanging out with you, and it's totally fun. And that's totally unusual for almost any other kind of animal. But we have so many more receptors for oxytocin. We are super sensitive to social information, both positive and negative, by the way, right? So if I diss you in some way, it's going to, feels like pain. But so we like being around the other humans. So I think one of the kind of key takeaways, like for economics and society, is putting people in an office building to have them work on a joint project, totally normal for humans. Not normal for chimpanzees or gorillas or whatever. But for us, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to work on this thing together. Yeah, we got a goal. Yeah, set me up. I can do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even though this is a neurochemical that is shared with mammals, that there is a big distinction between human behavior on this front neurochemically and the other animals. Has that also like been measured? Was that part of your work at all? Was to look at sort of chimpanzees or bonobos or anything like that and see where this sort of doesn't work for them?
Yeah, so we've done work with capuchin monkeys. Other people have worked with other animals. Capuchins are highly social, so they're kind of fun to work with, even though they bite. We show with capuchins is that they're so social that they don't actually need, they release enough oxytocin on their own. When we manipulate oxytocin pharmacologically, they're so chilled out, they don't even want to socialize. They're like, I'm getting all the benefits pharmacologically of being a social creature without getting this. So when I first started doing this work, I had these psychiatrists just kind of mobbing me like, we need this for our patients. We got to help them connect to other people. I'm like, let's slow down, right? Because this is an endogenous system that can be trained. It's adaptive like all brain systems. And I don't want to be drugging people because that could minimize the brain's own production of oxytocin, for example, or affect it. So I think it's really, I say hugs, not drugs. So let's lean into the natural systems and tune those. And that's really the work I've done over the last 20 years.
The one of the things that has happened since the COVID lockdown in particular, but it's persisted, and it was happening even before that, is what we are doing right now. So you and I are not in the same place. We've got the cameras situated such that I look like I'm looking you right in the eyes, but really what I'm looking at is a screen.
Right.
What happens to our brains when we're looking at each other right now that, or how is it different neurochemically to engage with people via screens and sort of video that looks like, oh, this looks like us. It looks like we're talking to each other. It feels a lot like we're talking to each other. But are there differences in the way we neurochemically respond to this kind of interaction? Because this is a larger and larger share of human interactions.
Right. So we actually did research on this pre-COVID lockdowns, just because it's a great question. And what we found is that relative to in-person interactions, that video conferencing gives you between 50 and 80% of the value neurologically as in person. Surprisingly high to me. And we also
Oh,
looked at
okay.
audio only and text, and just kind of rolls down the list. So I think the way to think about this, John, is something you and I have never done, but we've heard people like occasionally cry at movies. Like, what's that about? If you're cognitively intact, you know this is a fictional story, you know these are paid actors, you're not on drugs, and then at the end of the movie, when the boy dies or the dog dies, oh, people cry. Well, okay, that tells us how sensitive we are to that social information. It doesn't have to be real necessarily. So I do think there's some interesting societal and writing about this issues. Like once VR loses that latency and we start getting confused about whether I'm in VR or real life, maybe I just live my whole life in VR and I forget to eat and I have a VR girlfriend and I just disappear into some fictional world.
I'm actually really surprised to hear you say how high that percentage is, because I feel like I had come across some work suggesting that it was very, very low.
It,
Is there variation? How solid is this finding?
Yeah, I think I would say very solid. The question is what you're measuring. So, as I said earlier, we identified how the brain values social emotional experience. Not everybody is, it's published. We can just use it. You can use our software we built. But not everyone's measuring that. So, from an attentional perspective, it actually is less in person than, online versus in person. But we're actually looking at the value your brain gets from these experiences. So, it's a different question. But we've done this a bunch of times, and it seems to be pretty consistent.
Well, it's kind of a I'm happy to hear that. Because so our kids, even just like from the dating perspective, it's all shifted. Like what
Right.
used to be I'm going to approach you in the hall or at a dance is now going to start as like texting, and so and work its way up. Even if you meet in real life, like kids in school will start some kind of situationship through texts. And I know I sound like a total boomer old guy, but it is called Dad Saves America, so I'm allowed to be cringe. Um,
But you'd probably know that there's so much of mating that's smell driven, right, unconsciously. And so if you're doing by text, you're missing all those cues, estrogen levels and testosterone and tissue types. So we tend to optimally mate with people who are similar to us, but not too similar. You don't want to marry, siblings and cousins, but not also too dissimilar generally. So that's generally smell mediated. So yeah, you need to be around the people you want to hang out with.
so you've studied this neurochemical, oxytocin, that helps with trust and with bonding, and saying, "Oh, you are my." It helps me be my brother's keeper. Um, And then you talked about how, you've connected trust to wealth, which makes perfect sense when you really think about it. Because, as you said, if you want to do a deal, you want to build something that's going to ultimately make the world more productive, you have to engage in high trust things. You have to borrow, which requires trust. You have to hire someone and expect them to complete the job, which requires trust. Basically, everything that's not plucking apples off the tree yourself requires trust. So, one of the challenging questions this raises for me is, what is the causal direction there? Because is it that the high trust society is there first and the wealth building and the deal making comes? That's what it seems like you're saying. But then is there a feedback loop where engaging in trust building activities builds more trust and helps accelerate things? And then the harder one is, the Scandinavian countries are well known for having high trust. They're also genetically very homogenous. Mm-hmm. And so what role does cultural and genetic diversity play in reducing trust? And as an American, we're a very genetically diverse society. We've got a lot of different peoples from a lot of different places. And that's a source of a lot of controversy and a lot of distrust and a lot of tribalism. So how do you navigate all those different forces? How do you help me disentangle all that?
Yeah, that's the deep question. And so what we showed, and it's been replicated now by other people, is that we trust people who are similar to us, but that similarity has multiple dimensions. So if I spent a lot of time in Denmark. In Denmark, there's like 4 last names. They're all cousins.
Yeah.
Big welfare state, so what? Who cares? You're helping your cousin out, right? No big deal. But it turns out that similarity has other dimensions that can increase or decrease trust levels. For example, income distribution. Wider income distribution means people are in different kind of wealth levels than me or income levels than me. And so it's harder to trust people when there's a wider distribution of income, because if I meet a random person, I have to sort of figure out if they're kind of in my social strata.
So class.
Class, yeah, absolutely matters. Language matters, religion matters. These can be buffered by both informal and formal institutions. So in the US, we have fairly strong government institutions. So if you were to cheat me out of money, I have some recourse, right? I can go through institutions. And in a lot of countries, we have these informal institutions. So maybe a country your ancestors came from where you had people in Sicily who would break your knees if you didn't pay. So that's an informal enforcement mechanism. And it turns out you don't need a lot of threat of enforcement to actually get cooperation, right? Because we as humans have long lives and good memories. And so one way we enforce good behavior is by ostracizing people who don't play nicely. So there's this urban myth that, half the Fortune 100 CEOs are psychopaths. Not true at all. We've done a lot of work on criminal psychopaths. I have studied them neurologically, and they're impulsive. They're not good planners. They have bad social skills. They generally don't become CEOs. But think of what was the CEO who was caught the concert with his HR director, had to quit his job.
Oh yeah.
The astronomer.
Astronomer company, yeah.
Does that affect his job in any way? I mean, maybe we could make an argument, but
Sure.
But now he's seen as a kind of a social outcast. This is inappropriate behavior, and if you're leading other people in a company, you should have some level of social appropriate, right? You should behave properly. So that's that sort of social ostracization, right? I think the lady quit as well, the HR director. So they're out because they did something that was not acceptable. But we don't know anything about their lives. We don't know what their spouses think. Maybe everyone's cool with it. We don't know. So that's this kind of social pressure that we have to behave nicely. And that's why in the news, if it bleeds, it leads, because it's actually unusual. The work by Steven Pinker, the just gross reduction in violence that we've had. And you started out by saying, I think we have so much division now and all that. We've always had division, and that's normal human factors. And I think that's okay. That generates discussion. Like if we disagree with each other in a nice way, maybe we learn from each other.
Yeah, it's sort of like this modern truism that we are more polarized than ever. And I don't know how much of that is real and how much of that is simply that we now have everyone is a broadcaster with their pocket. And so we just perceive a lot of things that feel different and polarizing because they're being broadcast into our screens all the time. But in fact, the way people are and what people believe and what percentages of people believe different things isn't as different as we think. Like, how do you think about that? How do you think about sort of this polarization problem? Where is it true? Where is it false? Where is it in between?
Because the brain does adapt to the environment we're in, I'm very concerned about getting too much being screamed at, right? Screaming things gets your attention, right? I mean, evolutionarily, you got to avoid bad things. So I consciously have stopped watching the news for many years. I don't watch a lot of violent shows. I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in the helpful, connected human world as opposed to someone screaming at me all the time. Now, the different preferences, I'm not saying people should or shouldn't, but if you constantly are obsessed about Ukraine or immigration or whatever is in the news, is that healthy for you? Because that affect your life? So I think you got to pick and choose pretty carefully, because we do this old saying in neuroscience: neurons that fire together, wire together. So what you are, what you do. If you choose to engage in these activities, then they become kind of defaults for you. And I think that's not healthy.
I read this book that reminds me of a book I read that was recommended to me by my son, School Acton. It's called The Talent Code. And what its fundamental thesis was, if I'm remembering correctly, was that basically the way you learn as a person is operating right at the sort of limits of your capability. Like right where you want to be in this zone where it's hard and you can't quite do it and you're failing a little bit, but you're not constantly failing. You're sort of failing and then you're making breakthroughs, but you're right at the edge. And that when you're in that zone, it's sort of big. It was like sort of this pop psych book, but that what's happening is the like Ethernet cables of your mind are wrapping themselves closer together. I think he was actually saying that the myelin lining of the neural pathways was getting thickened, basically like laying higher bandwidth Ethernet through your brain around the thing that you're doing. Does that even make any sense? Am I remembering that correctly? Is that something that's understood to be a real thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's not the myelin, but it's actually the pathways, the ability to default in that behavior. So if you think about taking up a new activity, tennis or whatever that is, you get a lot of feedback, and that's how you learn fast. And if you have a coach, even better, who can help you with the grip and your feet. And at some point, it becomes natural. Once you become a good enough tennis player or basketball player, if you think about it, you'll screw up. You have to not think about it. You have to use that default because you've done it so many times. So the key is having that feedback, and you actually change the threshold for activity of that network where you have a sort of a tennis network. So if you actually look at the brain, anyone, tennis players, violin players, the areas that control that, particularly the motor areas, actually will grow. They'll take over some of the other areas of your brain. So you
Really?
literally become specialized in that. And if you don't use it, you begin to lose it. Like I took German in high school. When do I ever speak German? Never. So I can barely read. I can't speak German at all. But at some point, I sort of could, I guess, in high school.
Is this something that changes over time? Like there's a lot of talk around neuroplasticity and how to keep yourself adaptable. In fact, I've got your little the little book of happiness with Ben Franklin, my favorite founder, on the cover.
Yeah.
And among it's a great little book. All these little like science and action. It's like so right here it was adaptability.
Mhm.
Embracing the new activities and embracing the new activates dopamine release in the midbrain, facilitating a desire to explore. That's the science. How do we keep our brains flexible to learn new things, especially as we age?
Yeah, it's really important. The short answer is people. The longer answer is you've got to be kind of pushed into a new activity. So if I get really good at tennis, I like playing tennis. That's good. I don't play tennis. I'm just using it as an example. But then that doesn't help my brain grow in new areas. So you've actually got to be pushed into something new and be kind of bad at it, and then get feedback. And that's really good for your brain biologically. And people who engage in those activities are really thriving. They live longer, happier, and healthier. I call this extending your play span, by the way. The period of life you have to play, right, where you can just have fun and do crazy stuff. So you've got to be pushed, and it's hard to push yourself sometimes. But if you have, again, that group of guys or women or good friends or colleagues that will push you to do something new, then you've got to be forced to do that. So um, it's like when you take a long trip, and then you're excited when you agree to do it, and then the day you're leaving, you go, "What's wrong with me? Why would I travel for 30 hours?" So I'm going on holiday in 2 weeks to Africa, and it's going to be like a 30-hour trip. And I'm just like, I know I'm just going to travel is going to be brutal, but once I get there, I think it's going to be weird and crazy, and going with a friend, and it's going to be fun.
This sort of seeking novelty, training yourself to like deal with novelty. How do you think that the sort of internet experience that we're having now impacts that? because one, to come sort of back to these things around polarization or just our relationships to each other mediated through the screen is, it's a portal into just about anything, but it's also a portal we control, and we can just kind of gorge on the thing that we like. And all of the platforms that are optimizing for engagement try to give us more of what we engage with. And so, are we getting more novel experiences, or do you think in some ways that we're actually being sort of tunneled into repetition that's not healthy for us because of the way our technology works?
Yeah, I think the data suggests we're being funneled into stuff that we already like. Um, I've been writing more about AI, which is just going to make that even more acute. So there's something called sycophantic AI now that just loves you. Oh, keep your eyeballs on me. You're the best ever. And we all realize that that's not really healthy. Um, on the other hand, if you want true empathic AI, it's got to really understand your value system. So, I'm me, I'm a very strong libertarian. I don't want to be hearing about communism. I know it's a failed system. Don't send me more information. I already agree on that. It's not going to help me. But tell me about what's happening in Argentina. I'm interested. Okay, that's a interesting libertarian experiment that's been very successful, rapidly successful. And so, yeah, I'm interested in Argentina. And so I do want the algorithms to kind of push me. And that's why I think in real life, we've just got to get out there. So I think limiting screen time, certainly for kids, but also for adults. Go take a walk, go talk to your neighbors, go do something weird. I think the easiest way to have that unusual experience is to be out in some place that's not your normal setting. And I know that's sometimes a heavy lift. If you don't have the money or the energy, or you're not mobile, it can be harder. And I think that's the case in which you can have these, and maybe VR is a way to do that. To go to Africa with your VR headset and then feel like you're really there. Particularly once we add haptics and smell and things, that might become more real. But I think it's an ongoing battle. It's like people, right? You have people that that you just don't care to be around. There, I don't know, for whatever reason. And you have people you really love to be around. And so you don't want to just be around rando people that you dislike. I mean, it's okay. We can dislike some people, right? You have to say no.
It is a weird, one of the things that I've been thinking about is I feel like we're in a little bit of a moment that, for me at least, ideologically has been a brain buster. And that is, there are all these signs. In fact, like this YouTube channel, Dad Saves America, began as a documentary about what was happening with the mental health of our kids. And there's all these signs that are pretty like seriously measurable: anxiety, depression, suicidality among what is functionally the wealthiest, most comfortable generation planet Earth has ever seen. And I'm not even saying that to be judgmental of these young people. They're our kids.
Yeah.
But it raises the question. It was this question, how, the wealth of nations. How do you get wealth? Oh, having a high trust society, having division of labor, specialization, rule of law, Adam Smith type stuff. And, and then we come to this moment that we're at now, and you could see that it's been with us for a while because you can see much earlier writings bemoaning similar stuff, where comfort seems to exceed the level that we feel. It seems like we're built for. Like we're built to have more friction in our life than we have. And I just wonder how do you think about this from your expertise and your study on, like, have we gotten to a place where we're not getting enough friction in our life for our brains and for our for the human to be healthy mentally, healthy psychologically? Like, are we already in a kind of like Wall-E / Brave New World problem where, gosh, our kids they can just push a button on their phone and go out on an Uber, and they're not even doing that. They're staying in their house and they're miserable. How do you understand that dynamic?
The answer is yes. Right. So to think about physical fitness, right? If you just do the same running or weightlifting or whatever, you're not going to actually grow in your cardiovascular health or your musculature. You've actually got to have friction. You've got to have something that's challenging for you. When we see the same thing emotionally, that you need challenges. We call this challenge stress. You need that challenge stress where you're doing something hard and then you can come back and recover. And that actually builds up resilience. And I think with small families and the echo chamber of being fearful of everything, you don't have free range kids anymore who are just doing weird stuff on their own and maybe getting in a little trouble, maybe getting hurt. So when my kids are little, my wife's very risk averse, but I would say, hey, it's adventure day with dad. Anything, blood's okay. I don't want broken bones. That's a little too far. But falling out of trees, it's okay. You can get bruised up or, cut up. And so we wouldn't always tell mom exactly what we were doing. We'd just make sure we came home in one piece. So I think you need that friction. I think is a great word for that, John, that we need that friction, that difficulty. And we've been putting these kids in bubble wrap, and I don't think it's been very healthy. And we see the manifestation, as you said, in mental health disorders.
I mean, when I hear you describing experiences that might be able to be emulated effectively with VR, there's a part of me now, there's an earlier version of me that would simply be like, well, this is awesome and exciting, and because I love technology. Mm-hmm. There's an increasing part of me now that's like, that sounds like a dystopian hellscape.
Yeah. Right. And yet, I think, it could be valuable for some people. If you are homebound and you're not able to get out, I think travel is the easiest way, but just meeting new people, joining organizations. I moved recently. And so I joined some volunteer organizations. I've made my neighbors. I'm kind of a pain in the ass, as you know. So I'm just going to talk to everybody. And then, all of a sudden you find interesting things and you're doing this thing. You want to come? Oh, yeah, sure. Well, why not? So
yeah,
I think and I'm curious about you as well. I think at my stage of life, I'm trying to say yes to as many things as possible now, but saying no to things that I've already tried that are not useful for me. Like I don't have any online streamings. I don't have Netflix. I don't have any of that. I just say no. I don't watch the news. I'm just saving my time for those activities that I think are most valuable for me. But as we said earlier, people don't know their own preferences, and those preferences are actually not stable. They're going to change over time. So you don't know you're going to love something unless you try it.
Yeah, this has been something that has been a prior's challenge for me, which is, I put my son Mateo in a fair amount of self-directed education over the years. And
love the Active School. By the way, the best school, let's give them a plug. Best school program on the planet is Active Schools, in my view.
It's one of these things where I know I know personally that when I'm interested in something, I'm going to be engaged on it more than if I'm not interested. And the getting me interested in something I find boring is really, really hard and maybe impossible. And so you have this interesting challenge as a parent, which is, when do you force your kids to do things they don't like? And I'm not talking about like the chores, although that actually is true too. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking more like interests. Like, how far should you go in trying to force your kid to learn an instrument that they're saying they don't want to do, in a world where when you first start learning the piano, you're not good, and it sucks to not be good at something. And you don't think you like it because you're not good at it. And you have to cross certain thresholds to then have enough mastery that you like doing the activity. This is really hard. And I think like we've, as a freedom-loving person, I do worry that freedom gets taken maybe too far when it comes to our kids on this front. How do you think about that, again, through your neurological lens?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't have the perfect answer. I think as adults, we have more volition on what we do. Mm-hmm. So first of all, for parents, you're kind of off the hook because about 2/3 of your adult IQ is genetic. So your kids are going to turn out to be what they are. As long as you give them enough food and some love, or a lot of love, they're going to be fine. So don't stress about that. But I do think as parents, because kids don't know what they need, you should expose them to as many things as possible. And as you said, John, have them do it for some period of time to see if they really dig it. And I think that period might be a year. So I had two kids, and like they did ice skating for about a year, and one did music for about a year or two, and they said, okay, I've kind of like, I can play the saxophone or I can ice skate backwards, and I don't really want to join a team. I don't want to compete, but at least I learned how to do this. So I think the best example is my kids are both competitive swimmers. And one day, my daughter was swimming, she's, I don't know, let's say 12 years old. These are hard practices, outdoor, a couple hours, just pushing water. She got out of the pool, she threw up, and she got back in the pool and kept swimming. And when I picked her up, I'm like, congratulations, you've done something very few humans have done. You found your physical limit. But if you know what that physical limit is, and you just said, okay, I'm going to go past the limit. I thought I couldn't keep doing this. Getting back in the pool after you throw up, that's awesome, right? Like that's some level of prefrontal control of the brain. Like I'm just going to power through this thing. So if you can do that for that, you can probably do it for school. You can probably do it for, I don't know, something else that's hard, moving across country, which is hard, and whatever that is. So I think we have to train these kids to have that friction. I think your word is perfect. I want to have enough friction that I go, okay, this kind of hurts, but it's not going to kill me.
I'm curious about this because one of the things that I found in myself that I didn't know I could do was operate calmly with a lot of uncertainty and risk. And what I mean by that is, when I left, when we first met, I was creative director at Spike TV. And at that point, I was a good decade into working at Viacom, MTV, Nickelodeon, Spike TV. Right. And so I had the comfort of a long-standing, at that point, stable job career in a relatively large company that wasn't going to go anywhere. I'd survived, we met in 2010. So I was like, it was past the worst, let's say, of the financial crisis. And I still had my job, right? And I had good relationships. So I had this stability, and I didn't really see myself as an entrepreneur necessarily. I've always just loved creating new projects. But when I started Emergent Order back in 2011, and ever since, it's been this different thing. And that different thing, when you're creating something like a business and you're not getting a paycheck from an employer, is you don't really know where your next meal is going to come from. Like you sort of have to eat what you kill. You have to go out there and drum up business, and you can have more or less. And it's not guaranteed, but at around the 3-year mark, I wasn't sure if we were going to make it. And I remember the feeling of laying in bed, feeling like someone was sitting on my chest, like extreme anxiety. Like it was like runway was running out, and it was like, oh my gosh, like this is going to fail. I won't even be able to get unemployment benefits, because that's the other thing. As a small businessman, you don't get unemployment benefits if your business fails, because you're not. So, and this is a long story, but I hope for people who are in these kind of positions, it's useful. Over time, a decade later than from there, I can sleep pretty well at night, even when things get pretty scary. And I'm not sure why, but I think it's that I've just taught myself that I will survive those things that were scary before. Is that what's happening? Is it like surviving the scary thing at least teaches you that you will survive it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's acclimating to fear. So we actually acclimate to that kind of, so uncertainty is processed in the brain just like fear is, basically the same pathways in the brain. So if I don't know what's happening, it's very stressful. But once you've been through that, it's easy. So I do a lot of experiments on myself, because there's some things you can't ask people to do. So I was asked for a TV show to go tandem skydiving and take my blood before and after. And I'm a tall person. We're unstable normally, so I don't like heights necessarily, because I can fall off. Anyway, I agreed to do this. Great TV gig. This is for the Morgan Freeman Discovery Channel show, Through the Wormhole. And I'm like, come on, Morgan Freeman wants me to I'll do it. Yeah. And so took my blood before and after to see what happened. And the first time, scared out of my freaking mind if you were going skydiving. So big increase in stress hormones, increase in testosterone, small increase in oxytocin. It was tandem, so I was hooked to a real pro. And now I've done this for TV a bunch of times and just done it for fun and taken my blood every time because I'm insane. And first of all, cured my fear of heights on the first jump. And now I really love it. And like almost no fear response. Like there's an attentional response for sure. You got to get your body in the right position. Big oxytocin response. It's just super fun. So, and I probably did that when I was at 47 or something. So even at 47, my brain goes, oh, this thing that's like, now if I go, I just dangle my feet outside the airplane. Like, I don't care. Like, I know I have a parachute. I'm aware. It's no big deal. We're at 12,000 feet. I'll have time. I have time to open the parachute. It's not a big deal. So if a doofus like me can adapt to that, what you're doing is adaptable. So I think back to the kids, that's what we're sometimes not doing, or helicopter parents are not doing, which is allowing them to dangle their feet at 12,000 feet and figure out that it won't generally kill them.
You really are doing the thing. I am scared of heights, and I've been in high places, and what you're describing is pure terror to me.
All right, let's go together. You want to go skydiving with me?
Yeah, you can be my tandem buddy. We'll do it. We'll do it. Coming back to oxytocin, and but sort of staying with our kids. We have this this relationship landscape now. You and I are both. A friend of mine, Malcolm Collins, put it best. He said, we were like the last chopper out of Nam. Like I met my wife, and I'm sure you did too, in the pre-swipe app era.
Oh, can I go back and make a point about the previous thing you said about being a startup person and stress?
Please.
You covered over, I think, the most important thing ever.
Oh, okay.
When you were describing your road to be an entrepreneur, and you said, I had good relationships, and you had good relationships. You had a support system around you, right? You had a wife, or at least a serious girlfriend. You knew about a lot of people in the industry. You had those relationships that are basically a buffer in case things really go wrong. You could have gone back to Viacom or gone to another job in the worst case scenario. Maybe you didn't want to, but I think having those relationships, again, we're back to this social connection. So important. And having my own startup company, software company, I'm in startup land. I still sometimes lose sleep because I'm worried about making payroll, but I have hundreds of people that I have LinkedIn on and just ask them for help, and they've helped me.
Yeah.
Why? Building relationships, networking. They'll probably never get any payoff other than feeling good for helping me. But there's such an ethos, I think, particularly in America, less so, I think, in Europe and other countries and other continents, of just helping other humans out, just to be a part of the network and be good. So I literally talked to a guy I never met before today, except for on LinkedIn. It's like, oh yeah, I know a guy, let me connect you to him. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. They could really use your software. I'm like, you're awesome. What can I do to help you? I'm good. I just want to help you. I'm like, oh, thank you. Bless you. we need the revenue. So I think I just want to make that point for people who are listening. It's not that you or I are special and that we can absorb more risk and uncertainty. It's maybe a little bit that I like uncertainty, actually. I enjoy it. But also, I have a rich network. I have people that love me and around me and surround me. I couldn't make payroll some years ago, and I actually called a friend of mine who wrote me a check for $50,000. And I had receivables. I know I could pay him back, but he literally said, I can't make payroll tomorrow. Can I borrow $50,000 from you? Like, that is a friend, man. No paperwork, just like, I got to get the check today or I can't make payroll tomorrow.
I will say I have done literally exactly that with that amount. It was on a business account. No, actually, it was a personal account because I had just sold my house, and I had cash because we were moving, and a buddy of mine needed help, and it was like, well, what are friends for? I have the means to help you. I'm going to help, and it was just, it is like you have one life to live, and if it's not for being of service to other people, you can't take the rest of it with you. Like, you can only.
And now we're back to oxytocin, right? Once I help you, your brain releases oxytocin. You want to reciprocate, and that embeds us in community. So I think the thing that worries me the most about our young people is that lack of community, that loneliness. They're not really embedding because they're not, as you said, meeting your wife or my wife randomly I met my wife on an airplane. Like, what are the odds of that, right? So, but it was a real human, 4 hours of chatting on an airplane is a pretty good time to meet somebody.
So, to come back, because that was a perfect interruption segue back to it, which is it's about relationships. And, we got on the last chopper out of Nam in the sense that we met our spouses in the pre-swipe app, sort of thinly optimizing for something era, where I met my wife at work, you met your wife at an airplane, and it worked out. And when I look at what's happening in the dating space now, which is mostly by proxy through the young people here at our office, paying attention to what people are worried about on social, looking at these stats and things. It's pretty ugly out there. It's pretty scary. And one of the elements that has happened is there's this increasing divergence politically between young men and young women. So when you talk about trust and you talk about whether someone's in the tribe or not, and whether you're going to get that oxytocin release, you've got a world, it seems like, where the men aren't changing that much. They're getting maybe a little bit more right wing, but the women are getting apparently a lot more left wing. Right. Have you been paying attention to this? Do you have any thoughts on the dynamics of what's going on there, and how do you understand that?
Right. Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, there's a bunch of things going on. So part of this smell mediation is inhibited by when women use birth control. So you actually are not getting the signals. So that's part of it. Again, lots of reasons to use birth control. My kids are on birth control, my daughters. So, but I think it can inhibit that kind of matching factor. The question is, what does similarity mean, right? Do I need to be, I think we're really pushed this agenda now. I have to be politically in sync with my romantic partner. But there could be lots of other dimensions where you're in sync with him or her, right? So I don't know how important it is. I think also it comes to this recent research that I sent you, our stated preferences may not be our true preferences because I don't really know. So, this paper we published recently showing that men who identified as weakly affiliated with the Democratic Party, we gave them synthetic testosterone or placebo, they became Republicans. They really moved strongly right. So I think it was like, I want to be cool. These are all undergraduates, by the way, so may not generalize the general population, but I'm a cool guy. And we did this at UCLA. So I'm a UCLA student, and there was an election during one of the last elections. And so I'm going to say I'm a Democrat, but I'm not super strong Democrat. And then give me a little testosterone. I'm like, again, they don't know they're getting it. It's all blinded. And like, oh yeah, that Trump's awesome. That, whatever all the questions we asked them lots of questions, and everything kind of lined up nicely. And we actually did the same thing with oxytocin, that you give weakly affiliated Democrats oxytocin, men in this case as well, and they look a lot more like Republicans.
With oxytocin?
With oxytocin, yeah. And this was when George W. Bush was president. We did this years ago. And they liked the Supreme Court more. They trusted Congress more. That, like Bush. I mean, Bush was by the end of his second term, he was pretty controversial, I think.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of surprisingly strong results. And so testosterone is kind of the anti-oxytocin. That's why we study both those neurochemicals, because they work kind of in different directions. In this case, they worked the same way. And so I think in this, Danny Kahneman had this work, you mentioned him earlier, in the 70s, that people have poorly defined preferences over experiences you haven't had before. Like, how much do I like, I don't know, lavender flavored ice cream? I have no idea. I haven't had lavender ice cream. So if I see this cute guy or girl that say I'm romantically attracted to or physically attracted to, and he or she is a different political party, should I throw them out because of that? Or I would say there's probably lots of other dimensions where you probably have something in common, but you probably don't know that online, right? You have to actually see that person, see how they behave. By the way, a friend of mine who got married in his mid-50s for the first time, stress test his wife, who was younger than him, and took her on trips, took her traveling. She had never really traveled much internationally, and just saw how she behaved. So I think that's a great way to get to know somebody. Just kind of put them under moderate stress, or take them skydiving, one of the two.
To come back to your experiment with testosterone. I mean, you want to talk about, again, this is the paper that you sent me that prompted us to reconnect, and it's so of the moment, right? So a year ago, President Trump had been shot, and it led all of what was called sort of the manosphere podcast verse to come on board with President Trump. Rogan, all these guys. Dana White, as a former Spike TV guy, I always kind of laugh at the impact of Dana White in our politics today. It's like, I never would have thought that would happen. So you have this like narrative around masculinity, toxic masculinity, Do they have a point? Like, does going to the gym actually make you more right wing, like the Guardian and various left wing publications tried to browbeat us all with? Like, oh, if you go to the gym a lot, you're a proto Nazi. Is that are
Right.
you saying there's some truth to that?
There actually, in other people's published research, there is some evidence that men who identify as conservative are more muscular. So if you think of, conservative, like I think of this as more self-reliant individuals. For example, Second Amendment gun rights people. Well, I own a gun. I have a concealed carry permit, but want to be a self-sufficient human, right? I don't want to depend on. I don't know when the police are going to come. I want to be able to protect myself, my family, and
Mhm.
so yeah, I want to be in good shape. I want to be healthy. It's not that not necessarily I hate the government. Maybe I do. Who knows? But
Argentina, loving
yeah,
Javier.
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Go Javier Milei. But I that's my personality. Is I'm a protector kind of personality, and so I think if you have that, you want to be in good shape, and man, Trump putting up that fist and like fight, 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 like that's a guy, right? I
yeah,
mean, I don't
yeah,
think it's toxic. It's like here's a
yeah.
guy who can take a hit and keep on moving. Like I want to be that guy. So. Um, I think the reason I'm going to Africa is I'm obsessed with gorillas, and I think of gorillas as the best version of a man. A gorilla can murder you, but they don't. They're vegetarian. They're the biggest thing around. They don't kill rarely. They don't kill other animals. So I want to be the strongest thing around. And if I have to kill you, I will. But I'd rather not. I'd rather just have you be nice and let's all get along. So I think there's a lot of men who feel that way too. Like my job as a larger human is to protect other people. And I take that seriously, whether it's my family or my neighbors or whomever. And I think it's okay for men to be masculine. Would you
This,
agree?
I mean, for sure. And it's like, it's funny because it's like in a lot of ways, I'm by no means the most masculine guy. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Disney animator. I've always actually been an artist,
Hmm.
but I'm also like a Philly slash Jersey Italian American that grew up with my dad swinging a hammer. And I kind
Yeah.
of don't, I will say, if you don't know how to swing a hammer, I don't respect you quite as much as a guy. And I realize that's like not
Right.
fair. There's people who aren't good with their hands, but they're still men. But there's stuff like that I just think feels like very primordial as a guy.
Hmm.
Um, you know, my friend and sort of filmmaking collaborator on our movie The Pursuit, Arthur Brooks, talks about contempt in relationships and compares it to anger. And he
Hmm.
draws on all this, sort of psychological slash family research that basically, if you are contemptuous, you roll your eyes when your spouse talks, that's real bad. That's a path to divorce. But
Right.
getting angry is perfectly fine. It's
Yeah.
okay to get angry. It's okay to scream to scream and yell a little bit and then get over it. It's actually better to scream and yell and get over it than to bottle it up and then roll your eyes and just hold contempt for other people. So I bring that up because I do I come from a family of Italian men. We all kind of scream and yell from time to time. It's just
Right. But that means you care about something, right? Like this is important to me. Like this is pissing me off or whatever, or I'm frustrated. I think we should, yeah. So it's not toxic masculinity. That's just human nature, right? So my wife's Italian American from New Jersey, so she's
yeah.
also a yeller.
Yeah, so she's a screaming crazy person. So
Yeah, she can
yeah.
do that. But then I just realized like, oh, it'll blow over. Like, and it's not that big of a deal. But that's the way she expresses that emotion. So again, for listeners, emotions are how we show the importance of something. Doesn't mean you want to be a screaming maniac all the time.
No.
No one wants to be around that. But yeah, I think, for example, violence. Like if you had brothers or friend, we all fought. Like again, we were free range kids. Right? We're the
Yeah.
last, as you said, the last helicopter out. Um, I've been in so many fights. I mean, I spent 5 years living in Philly, right? I went to graduate school there. So I got a bunch of fights in Philly. Like I wasn't the aggressor, but like people would just, I don't know, in bars, like start picking fights with me, whatever. I'm like, all
The
right, I
city
guess
of
we're fighting.
brotherly love.
Yeah. But once you've been hit a couple times, it doesn't bother you that much. And then I always feel like I'm a big guy. If you want to fight with me, like it's fine. It doesn't bother me. But I'm not gonna go hide in a corner and cry. That's just not doesn't seem healthy for anybody to do that. Well, maybe if you're tiny, I mean, maybe I'm being too toxic. But I just think you're right. For example, I remember once my dog was barking and there was like a big rat that was like nesting behind our house. Well, rats are not, it's not clean. And I had to kill the rat. And I told my kids to go inside. I'm like, you don't want to see this? I got to kill this rat. And if you want to see it when it's dead, maybe, but it's not going to be pretty. And I'm sorry I have to do it, but I can't have a rat nesting underneath our house. It's just not healthy. I don't know what else is going to happen there. So um, that's more of a guy job.
Yeah.
Could my wife have done it? Probably, but it would have really bothered her a lot. She would have thought about it. It's got to be done. So I think we should celebrate the diversity of on multiple dimensions, right? We have strong men, we have strong women physically, we have people who are emotionally stronger, and let's just accept people the way they are. I think that's real diversity, and not put people in some box based on how much melanin you have on your skin.
Yeah, I do. It does feel like the world is at least partly starting to heal from the like absolute peak insanity post 2020 of identity politics, where you really, too many people just went full Maoism, like felt like they could not say things that were obviously true for fear of basically losing your job or being socially ostracized. And that's we're rebalancing back to something like, we can acknowledge the differences between men and women, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just like, that was how all of life was up until 5 minutes ago. We can go back to that recognition and it's fine.
And there's a distribution across men and women, right? So I think, that's, to me, real diversity is that there's not just an average. That's, as I said earlier, that's not very interesting to me, but with this whole variety of the human experience. And so I think one of the things, I'm sorry to cut you off, John, but one of the things I've really kind of come to is our goal to be effective humans is to just accept people as they are, love them the way they are, let them be the way they are, not try to put them in a box, because we're all weird and different, and that makes life beautiful.
One of the so you gave these loosely affiliated young Democrats testosterone, and they became Republican. One of the
we gave everybody testosterone, but you can only convert those people, right?
So it was only the weakly affiliated ones.
Yeah.
So dig into that a little bit. And I realize that this is not necessarily something that we should ground as being like the most replicatable, highly fact. These things are it's an experiment. Is it? Yeah. And it was is this the one instance of this sort of test like this in this way for you?
As far as I know, other than we did the Oxytocin one prior. So it was 136 men, so pretty good sample size. So 80 of those got testosterone, and I don't know, 40 of those were weakly affiliated males. So they only liked Republican items a lot more. They became less affiliated with the Democratic Party by 12%. And so I think this is getting back to, I don't really know my preferences, so I want to state something that's socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And if you bump me a little bit, then that'll change. So so at this point, it's not to drug people, obviously, but we've actually shown this very similar things with using these videos that really are very valuable neurologically. That can increase support for example, free market capitalism, decrease support for socialism. When you talk about that, we've shown the same thing for racism, like people who have kind of baseline racist attitudes. You show them a video on why racism is bad, and if that video hits the brain hard enough, and we can measure that, then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we shouldn't treat people with different skin color differently. And we're like, oh, that really worked. So again, that's the persuasion thing about, are those nudges? Maybe. We talked about nudges early on. So, but at least I'm telling you, you're going to watch a video and, you're part of this study and you can either do it or not. But I do think that ability to communicate the value of accepting people as they are and having different viewpoints is really important. And then maybe nudging people towards more focus on individual freedom and liberty. I mean, this stuff happening in New York City is totally scary to me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's well, and it cuts across all of the things we're talking about in a way, because what it seems like is happening in New York City with regard to the rising support for self-avowed, I'm just going to say communist, because he says he wants to seize the means of production, and his stated goals are explicitly Marxist.
Right.
Zoran Mamdani, and there's another one in Minneapolis, a sort of Mamdani clone there. He's got the sort of upper middle class managerial elite behind him, people that are making six-figure salaries, graduated from Columbia, think of themselves as being, there's something going on there that is complex and bizarre and not rooted in any like history, in the sense that like you just have to study these ideas and see where they've been implemented every single time on every single continent and creed. Right. But that's like the easy flippant way to say you're all a bunch of idiots. And sort of what your study is pointing to is that I'm just curious how much of our politics, how much of our moral beliefs are somewhat hard-coded preferentially and rooted in something like the big five personality traits. Like, is it just you've got there was a recent study about the collapse, or a recent set of surveys that are showing that there's this big collapse in conscientiousness, which is very strongly correlated with like life success.
Right.
So are we seeing like high neurotic, low conscientious people who are kind of wired to want someone to protect and take care of them, and therefore somebody comes along and says, I'll give you free buses and government grocery stores, and it's like, oh good, I don't need to worry about food and transport. Like, what's going on there? Like, how much of the postures that we look at and see them expressed as politics are expressions of deeper neurological and temperamental predispositions from your perspective?
Yeah. So I think in the published literature, about 50% of your political preferences are genetic.
Are
So
you
it comes from
talking
your
about?
parents.
Are you talking about the twin studies when you cite the
Yeah,
literature
primarily
there?
twin studies, which again have lots of problems, and so I don't want to put too much weight on that. And then you have life history, and then you have your current state that you're in. So again, the kind of complicated mapping. But I do think, you mentioned Columbia. So if you went to one of these elite schools and you've been told, or even public government schools, how bad capitalism is and how racist the U.S. is, and someone should fix all these problems, again, it's like why I don't watch the news. If I don't want to program myself to be anxious about everything in the world. So I'm just not, I'm going to read the stuff I care about and not read other things. Obviously, I read the news because I knew about New York, right? So I'm not
Yeah. You're
clueless.
exposed
So,
to it to some
yeah.
degree.
So again, we're back to this, neurons that fire together, wire together. So if you've been convinced since you were in middle school that the US is the most racist country, or that capitalism is bad and Marxism works, and you haven't done your own research, you haven't been skeptical like you and I have been, even Arthur C. Brooks, our friend, right, he wrote this book, Who Really Cares? And he said in the intro of that book, this is 25 years ago, he said, I'm a liberal and I do research. And it turns out that conservatives donate more time, donate more money. They're actually the people who really care. And it looks like the liberals think, well, the government will do it, so I don't need to get involved in helping other people.
Christian
And so
conservatives gave more as a share of their income, and also tended to be lower income. So poorer working class Christians give a larger share of their income to charity and give more time and volunteer more than limousine liberals.
Yeah. And so do we have a lot of limousine liberals in New York City? Yeah, I think we do. I love your opinion on this, but I sort of almost want this guy to be elected and see how bad it's going to get. So we run this experiment here. And then we have some cities and states that have done this already. Chicago's a great example of just a city in crisis, in my view. And who suffers the most? It's the poor. The wealthy people can leave, or like California where I live, like, everyone's leaving, right? It's just poorly run. And so I think it's unfair. If you're wealthy in New York City, you're going to leave, or you have private security, or apparently now I saw this somewhere in California, there's an app where you can just ask for an off-duty policeman to come stand in front of your house because the crime's so bad in LA. Like, okay, this is a huge problem, right? It's like this is not the solution we're looking for. So I don't know. What's your view, John? You probably are more informed than me.
Well, I don't know about that, but I will say this. I'm of two minds. So I talk about these broader subjects and these political issues partly because I care about them, partly because as a show, I think these are conversations we have with our kids all the time. And so I'm hoping that I'm helping people that watch grapple with them. Maybe you don't agree with me, but maybe it helps you think about the reasons why you don't agree with me or you. When it comes to this resurgent socialistic mindset taking place, there's a couple, I think of it through a couple different lenses. So one is, well, time for some good old H.L. Mencken style democracy, which is the theory that the voters know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard. So, all right, New York, you want to elect a 34-year-old Nepo baby who's never held a real job in his life and whose conception of the world is basically built on top of having a super famous filmmaker mother and going to, approaching six-figure high school? Well, you're going to get it good and hard. This guy doesn't know anything about reality. Right. And so maybe that's an experiment that will teach us something or teach somebody something. Where I get a little more worried is it seems like in our political landscape, the center left has utterly collapsed. Mm-hmm. And so you actually have a kind of strange thing where, yes, the right of center all the way out has a bunch of diversity, actually. It has it's got the rhinos or whatever, like the old school Bush Republicans. They're kind of dormant. But you've got a lot of sort of philosophical and policy and preferential diversity across the right. And you even see the coalition that is currently in power represents that. The Speaker of the House, not some super radical far right guy. He's a pretty moderate guy. And then you've got him in a good relationship with Trump, who's sort of peculiar and uniquely Trumpy and MAGA, and that's Trump. And so that's this interesting coalition on the right. On the left, you have, and maybe this is unfair, but I'm going to say it because this is what I believe to be true. You have a cohort of geriatric corrupt scammers. There's scammers on both sides, but you have the Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, these are the people that bailed out the banks while claiming they were progressive. They're the people that have voted for every war, despite saying that they were basically 1960s radicals. And so they're provably liars. And then you've got the Obama-Hillary crew that really appear to have tried to conduct a coup with the Russiagate stuff, and also have personally enriched themselves manifestly in ways that are objective. Barack Obama has a waterfront property, multiple waterfront properties, while claiming that climate change is a problem. But he has a house that's millions and millions of dollars that he actually held a birthday party at during COVID in Martha's Vineyard. So the center left is just like a rotten sulfuric corpse. And so all that you've got that looks like it's authentic and has real beliefs are the radicals. That's what it seems like. That seems real bad. That's real bad for our society, that the only people that are the countervailing place to go if you're whatever are radical communists. And so my worry, and I know I'm monologuing, but you asked me, so I'll indulge myself. I'm sorry, everyone. Is let's say Mamdani wins. I'm not a good enough politico to know whether the calculus is good for 2028 or for the midterms or any of that. But what I worry is it's quite empowering for the crazy zombie radical lunatics who believe in the 20th century's most murderous ideology. Are we going to have a wave of more mayors that are explicitly socialist? I mean, this ideology for me is no better than the Nazis. It's actually worse, and it actually killed more people than the Nazis.
Yeah, it killed 100 million people in the 20th century. Communism did, right?
So I think probably the best answer is you have to fight communism all the time, every day, everywhere, all the time, without end, relentlessly, forever.
I totally agree with you. And yet, if you're in that echo chamber, all you hear is U.S. bad, U.S. bad. I mean, think of even these movies like Wall Street with Michael Dunn. I didn't watch it. I'm like, I don't want to watch that. Like everyone's so evil because they have money. Like if you earned your money fairly, God bless you. You do whatever you want to do. Like it's none of my business, right? Why would you take that coercively take that from me because you think other people should have my money? I mean, it makes no sense at all. So I think, yeah, we have to have this sense of, again, we're back to self-sufficiency. I think that's why we see Hispanics, we see a lot of males moving to that rightward side, which is like I can take care of myself. I'm good. I want the government to tell me what to do. And again, we're back to that kind of average, that nudging thing. So the
Yeah.
government's going to say, well, here's what you must do. Why must? Well, who are you to tell me?
Yeah.
You're a politician. I don't even want, I don't. So I think, you don't want to have sort of civil war, but, um, I mean, think of Chicago. They've had, coming on 1,000 murders in this year. Like, those are people that no longer exist because you can't just maintain order. And that's, mostly a socialist kind of city, in my view.
Oh yeah, I
So
mean that
I don't know.
the mayor was you got like almost 90% of his funding from the teachers unions, which are
Right.
which are truly a parasitic element of our society that shouldn't
Right.
exist, shouldn't be allowed to exist. Yeah, the thing, I had Rob Henderson on the show. I don't know how familiar you are with his book Troubled. It's really great.
Mm.
So he coined this term luxury beliefs,
Mm.
which is the beliefs of relatively well-off people that they get to hold in the name of looking friendly and lovely and aren't they great, but that actually inflict costs on everybody else, especially the working class and the poor. And that's what defund the police and all this stuff looks like and is, which is, oh, I can look like I care. It costs me nothing to go into the voting booth and pull a lever, and then I go back to the Upper West Side where I'm safe and where my police haven't been defunded. And then we'll defund the cops and Flatbush and the Bronx. See an increase in people dying.
Right.
And that's just there's nothing moral about that. It's really a strange phenomenon. It points to something I'm curious how you think about neurologically. And that is, for all of our talk in our society about money, it seems like the most core pursuit, and money can be part of this, but it isn't always, is status. That we are, to some extent, a status-seeking creature. That we have a desire to have a position. And in Rob's book, he talks about the changing opinions of the play Hamilton. So when Hamilton first came out, the only way you could see it was on Broadway, and the tickets were like $500. And everyone loved Hamilton. And oh, Manuel Miranda is a genius. And this is just a modern masterpiece, which I actually think it is. I love Hamilton.
Me too.
And then it came out on Disney Plus, and every Joe Schmo could have it. And suddenly, all those elites and those subscribers to the New York Times start to shift to thinking that, oh wait, no, Hamilton's not great. Hamilton's actually papering over the racist oppression and 1619 nature of American history, and it just put a brown face on white supremacy. And his thesis is that's all because once Hamilton was democratized and everyone could have it, the positional good value of having seen Hamilton went away, and so the status seekers didn't like it anymore. Mm-hmm. How do you understand status seeking through your work and the neurochemistry of status seeking?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So we see a couple things happen when people increase their status. This happens also in non-human primates as well. Where non-human primates, you can remove the, say, alpha male or alpha female. You see an increase in testosterone. So testosterone is the wonder drug. So when we do testosterone experiments, when we started doing them, I always when we do lots of drug studies, I always take the drug myself so I can say honestly to participants, hey, I took this for a week. I didn't kill anybody. It didn't make me feel bad. I mean, on testosterone, by the way, don't abuse testosterone, but less need for sleep, great workouts, high energy. Let's say my wife was really tired that week. I mean, this is great stuff. So, so your status goes up for men and for women. Testosterone goes up. Cortisol, this long-term stress hormone, goes down. Serotonin goes up. You get this kind of mood boost. Oh, status is really important for primates in particular, but all mammals. And so, yeah, it's great. That's like just winning the lottery. And then, who wants, in terms of social connection? Do you want to be around a low status person or a high status person? I want to hang out with a homeless guy in my street, or I want to hang out with whatever, someone famous. Right. So we think it's like movie stars. When you run into movie stars that you do occasionally, and you feel like you know them and they're a high status person, you want to talk to them. They don't know who the hell you are, right? They don't care.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that status is like, it's like really valuable social capital that we want to establish, and we want to maintain that through these kind of virtue signaling behaviors, right? So just as I said, the guy from the astronomer who lost his job, the CEO, from cheating on his wife, you don't want to be that person. You want to be like, oh yes, I support Black Lives Matter, or I support, whether you do or not. That's certainly a good talking line. What's it cost you to say that, or again to vote for Mandami or whoever? Cost you nothing.
It's
but you gain status.
Is status in this sense fundamentally a zero-sum game because it's positional? You can only be at the top of the pyramid. Because this is one of the things, the keeping up with the Joneses of it all. Mm-hmm. It's so fundamentally human. But the world is not a zero-sum game, as I know you understand.
Yeah.
There's now 4 billion people on this planet living what is functionally a middle-class modern life, and there was only 1 billion people total on the planet in 1880. So we have 4x the population of the whole planet living modern lives of wonder, and even more total living and living better and better. So the world can't be a zero-sum game, because where did the 4 billion steal all the stuff from? Mars? We built it. We build more stuff. But if you have a positional good, a luxury good, status, only one person can be number one, and number two is the first loser. How does that work out? Is that true?
Dimensions. You got multiple dimensions, right? I could be the best looking, or I could be the smartest, or I could be so I think that we're back to kids. I think the key in life is for kids to kind of find that niche where you're kind of a superstar in your little lane, if possible, right? You can't be a superstar at everything. So yeah, I think, I think status can be very dangerous if you're seeking status all the time. Think of these people who become, movie stars young in life, and their life is just terrible. Start getting into drugs, and it's hard to maintain that status. I think we should just be who we are, and I think I think the problem with these left-leaning individuals or communism is it's really infantilizing for individuals.
Yeah.
You are not a sentient being with your own preferences and ability to care for yourself. You have to have some big entity tell you what to do and care for you. And perhaps people who are really anxious desire that. Maybe that's why we see more young people kind of leaning leftward. But if you're an adult and you have a sense of purpose in life and you can support yourself, why would you as an adult let anyone tell you what to do? Unless you're asking for advice, and maybe from a specialist, a physician or something. But like, I don't want to be told what to do. I'm good. You're good. I'm good. Don't tell me what to do. Just leave me alone.
This book, which is really like a series of exercises and practices, is about happiness. And you've talked about and written about some really simple core pillars of happiness. What are they, and how should we think about trying to build a happy life from your perspective? And what does happiness mean when you talk about happiness here?
Yeah, it's really, happiness is this acute state of joy where you're having a good time. But the book really is about thriving. Like, to really thrive as a human being, you need 4 things, basically. Yeah, you need 5, but I'm going to just focus on 4. Diet, exercise, sleep. We know all that. Recent research out of Oxford University showed that about 50% of our happiness is due to the quality of our social relationships. Awesome. How's that help me? Is it the number of people on my phone? Is it right? And so, since we identified how the brain values social emotional relationships, as you know, we have a free app called Six that allows people to measure that and links to your calendar and where you are and shows you what's most valuable to you, so you can get enough of this social interaction. so that you can actually thrive as a human being. So yeah, I do a lot of writing like you, John. And so often I get a key moment by myself writing, but most of those key moments are social. So it's this little software working in the background nudging you, hey, go hang out with Paul Zak more. Those are always fun conversations. You should do that, or Arthur Brooks or whatever. And so it's just this reminder of the value we need to go do things. Again, what I'm experiencing as high value now is going to change over time. So it's going to help me figure that out because I don't know my underlying preferences. So diet, exercise, sleep, that's table stakes. I think where the book is focused is on how do I become a better human so that I build that rich social life that is so important, because people who are lonely, who are depressed, don't sleep well, they don't eat well, they don't exercise. So the leverage is in following these what are called virtuous behaviors. So as you know, the virtues are activities that put someone else and make them more important than I am. Whereas the seven deadly sins are all about selfishness, right? They're deadly because they say, "Oh, I'm the most important thing on the planet. Screw you. I'm going to steal from you or do whatever."
You know,
And so, yeah, and so they're exercises. I think they're fun and they're science based.
yeah, yeah. I'm going to flip to a random page and see. Okay,
Yeah,
number 30, perseverance. The science. Practicing sustained performance in one task can make perseverance in other tasks easier. That's really interesting. Practicing
we're back to
sustained
friction.
performance in one task can make perseverance in other tasks easier. So yeah, when I really work on being excellent, I learn what it's going to take to get excellent and stay
Right.
on it. And so you have three pieces of example of
Yeah.
practice. If you are healthy enough, increase your exercise by 50% for a day. Reflect on how you feel. That's a good bit of practice. Number 2, finish the long book on your nightstand or buy a thick book and read it. It's good. 3, eat vegetarian for 1 week. If you are a vegetarian, do number 1 or 2 twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's like, it's filled with stuff like this. It's great. It's a great, and it's like, it's little, which is also
Yeah.
great because there's so much pop psychology out there. There's so many things claiming to have sure shot tips and tricks. And so much of what constitutes our character starts as a habit, right? Starts as a, how do I just start doing this thing over and over? Maybe it starts off as fake it till you make it. And then
Mm-hmm.
before you know it, you're not faking it anymore. And then 30 to 60 days later, if you've stayed with it, you're a slightly different person than you were at the start of the process.
Yeah. I think I summarized the whole book, as I say in the introduction. I call this love plus. Try to add love to the world. Every social interaction, make that person a little bit happier. If you're doing that regularly, and you can't always do it. Maybe some mean people, but try to make the world a slightly better place socially, and then it becomes really easy to do it. So, I think you do that, John. I hope I do that.
I sure try. One of the things that, in our as we've woven through our occasional talk of despising communism, I think the person that might be say like, "Oh, I like all this psychology talk," but then you start bashing on communism and you just sound selfish. I think that the thing that is so misunderstood about what we call capitalism or free enterprise or individualism is, and I'm curious how you think about this, if you and how you want to add to or modify this. But a friend of mine, Mike Leahy, put it really great. He said, capitalism is the most moral system. Capitalism being basically voluntary exchange, adults exchanging with each other through consent and persuasion, not force. That capitalism is the most moral system because it requires for you to give before you can receive. And that is not selfish. That is actually being of service, which is why most businesses talk a lot about customer service, because that is what you're in the job of doing. You have to serve customers. You have to make someone else happy in order to benefit. And so the notion that a system like communism that says, no, you are owed things from everyone else, and that's the nature of the system, like, that just seems like the selfish system. Like, hey, I have rights to health, to housing and healthcare and food and shelter and all the materials of the world. I have rights to them. including when those involve making claims to other people's work. So it's like, so you have a right to enslave others so that you can have the things you want? I don't know how we've managed to get this far into modern society and have this moral inversion remain so steadfast in place in people's minds. Why do you think that is? And how do you think about that's like sort of weird dichotomy?
Yeah, it is really weird. I wrote a book 20 years ago called Moral Markets, and reviewing all kinds of literature that shows that even small-scale societies that begin to trade in markets as opposed to being self-sufficient or being subsistence farmers, they become more fair. They become more other regarding because they realize like, oh, I can specialize and just do the thing I like doing, and you can do the thing you like doing, and we can voluntarily trade. So it's very empowering. Anyway, there's just lots of evidence that exposure to markets makes people more moral, not less moral. Because again, are you going to trade with someone with a company or an individual that takes advantage of you? No, you're going to ostracize them. They're going to go out of business. So there's a big incentive to do the right thing. Again, most of the time. Do people cheat? Sure. They're humans. People are going to cheat. Yeah, I think it's fascinating that, remember the old Soviet Union joke? You know, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you're coercing me to take all of my stuff and distribute it the way you think you want it. And by the way, the elites always got plenty of money, in the Soviet Union. So same thing in Venezuela. People are starving to death, and yet North Korea, people are starting to get, but the elites are doing fine. So how is this a moral system? Right? That this is basically the kind of a big man system in tribal cultures, right? Where there's one big man who gets all the stuff and everyone else, has to eat the scraps. That doesn't seem fair to me. Like, why can't we all just make what we want to make? So I think it's this, you probably know better than me, John, but this sort of poor analytical thinking, which is, shouldn't it be fair that everybody gets everything equally? But why is fair? Biology is not fair, right? You and I got good genes. We got good IQ. We had parents that took care of us. Some people didn't get that. That's not fair. We grew up here. We didn't grow up in I don't know, whatever, South Africa. Didn't grow up in Venezuela. Nothing's fair.
Yeah.
But what is fair is giving people the chance to do what they want to do and not coercing them. I think coercion is a form of violence. Words are not violence, but coercion at the point of a gun or a tip of a knife, that's real violence. If you're going to it's robbery to me to be taking from everybody because you decide that everyone gets the average. So I taught at Arizona State University years ago, and I didn't know I was visiting. And I said, if you get an A, everyone get an A or an A plus, whatever. Like, oh, we don't have pluses and minuses here. I'm like, really? I'm like, why don't you? B plus and an A are really different. Anyway, I said, well, what's the next thing? Everyone gets the same grade. Like, oh yeah, we like that. Everyone gets the same grade. I'm like, you know what that grade is, right? It's a D. If you all get the same grade, why are you even working? What? So that's communism. You can all everyone can be equally poor, right? That's the only outcome we've ever seen with communism, except for the elites. So why not say you can be self-sufficient, do what you want to do? I think it's like the bailouts after 2008 that you talked about.
Yeah.
Right. So my dear wife, who's a sweetheart of a person, but extremely leftward leaning, said, oh, they're bailing out General Motors. I'm like, General Motors has been losing money for like 15 years. Like, they need to go bankrupt, get smaller, right? They have to have pension issues, all kinds of issues. She said, oh, no, they have to be. I said, oh, they're not being saved because there's 250,000 Democratic voters in the union, right? There's no reason they're being bailed out because of that. I said, where's it in? What about the corner beauty shop that has lost business because people have lost their jobs? She said, yeah, they should be bailed out. So
eventually you ran out of other people's money is the challenge.
Yeah, exactly right. So everyone gets crap because we have a teeny little bit of money to share with everybody. So I think it's just not thinking clearly about the dynamics of the economy. Back to Schumpeter and creative destruction, and I think in the U.S. with this much lower regulation than we see in Europe and other places, a lot of creative destruction. Don't you love it when you look at LinkedIn? I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and you see all the jobs that people have had, and some of those you got laid off, they got fired, and they're like, oh yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I worked at Google. I have a friend who worked at Google for a couple of years and couldn't. It's not the workers' paradise at Google. Couldn't take it. Now she works at Meta, and she goes, oh yeah, I it was fun for the first 6 months, and then they just beat the crap out of me, and then I took a different job. and I got a raise.
It's
Awesome.
it's an interesting. It is this. One of the things that I grapple with about the dynamism of our society is that it does have costs that a lot of times those of us that are very pro free enterprise don't acknowledge as much as maybe we should. And then there's people who acknowledge those costs and think that there's something that they can do about it at the level of the whole society, like protecting people from change. Like we can't really protect people from change, but we have to acknowledge change can be quite painful. And at the level of like the individual, and at the in our mind, when we've sort of been circling this throughout this conversation, what is your advice for setting yourself up to deal with change? Because the world's changing all the time. It does seem like maybe it's changing at an accelerating rate. Maybe the AI technology and automation will cause that to accelerate even more than we think. There's certainly the people trying to raise money for that certainly believe that. I don't know what to believe as far as the limits of this tech. But how do we as human beings steel our minds and our souls and our bodies to adapt to and survive and thrive in a changing world?
Yeah, deep question. I think the first cut on that is that every biological system is adaptable. Your brain's adaptable. Even in old age, people are creating new neurons in parts of the brain. We can still learn and adapt as we get older. So there's no sense in which you're going to be left out of whatever AI revolution or creative destruction that we're seeing. But I think we have to, again, it's that friction notion that you brought up, which I really like. I think I'll steal.
Please
That
do.
we need some sufficient friction. If you get too comfortable in your job, in your life, if you take your wife for granted, John, that's not good. You want a little friction. You want to mix it up. Hey, honey, let's go to dinner. Yeah, I'm not tired. Yeah, come on, let's go and let's go see a movie. A little bit of change, right? So I think forcing ourselves to be a little uncomfortable, and we're back to young people as well, I think is really the key, where we're comfortable being slightly uncomfortable. I don't think you have to, do a cold plunge every day or whatever. I'm not even sure that works, but um, all systems evolve, and I think of the economy as a complex adaptive system that's constantly moving. And communism is a fixed system with a fixed pie. As you said, this is not a zero-sum world. And if we understand that we can find these niches where we can both have fun and enjoy what we're doing and get the satisfaction from working. It's like Americans working way more than most other countries, although not all. Um, when you get these email autoresponders from your friends
Yeah.
in Europe, like, I'm gone for 6 weeks. I'm like, 6 weeks? I don't even know what I can do for 6 weeks. I like working. I work every day. It's fun for me.
You know what's so
So
funny about
yeah,
that, just to digress for a moment,
yeah.
people think it's like the nature of the European culture or something. It's not. Europeans used to work a lot more. Then they set their marginal tax rates above 60%. And they stopped working so much. It's just incentives, folks. Like this isn't
Yeah.
rocket science. That is a measurable thing. Like people in the States that have been to the Scandinavia once and liked that everyone was on bicycles thinks that somehow they figured something magic out. And it's like, well, no, Scandinavia was is still relatively free market, but was essentially like a laissez-faire society and got wealthy and then sort of instituted a bunch of high tax stuff, and they trust each other enough that they don't mind giving to their cousin Sven through the tax system. And when you actually poll those Scandinavians but say it's going to go to an immigrant, they look exactly like Americans.
Yep.
So like all the assumptions about the way this stuff works that underpin the Mamdani lovers, they just don't hold up under any amount of scrutiny at all.
Mhm. And you can't say, well, the Soviet Union just didn't do it right, or North Korea. No, we've tried this experiment zillions of times. And to have this be in this dynamic system is stressful. And I think we should have some safety net for sure for people who kind of get caught between the cracks. But the dynamism means you can potentially find a place where you get paid for helping other people. That's what voluntary exchange is, and you like it, right? Like you and I, we found the best jobs for us. Like, how much fun do you have every day? I have fun every day.
Yeah.
I'm so happy they pay me to do this because it's a weird freaking job I have. My kids are like, what do you do? Why do they even pay you? Or like giving talks. Or like they pay you to go give a talk somewhere? Like how can that be possible?
Last sort of line of conversation I want to touch on, and I'll push on you a little bit here, so you squirm away. At the start of the conversation, you mentioned doing work that got funded by 3-letter agencies.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a time where, you have USAID and you have all this crazy stuff. You have this idea of hybrid war, which is that, and Mike Benz and Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and others have pointed to this, Eric Weinstein has as well, that our government for a long time and other governments have been engaged in mass persuasion propaganda type of stuff to try to manipulate the things we believe. That's the most nefarious version of this. So I'd be curious to hear how much you can talk about what these 3-letter agencies have been asking you to do, because that sounds vaguely ominous. But the second piece is broader and also touches on things Marx and Marxists like to say, which is, persuasion can be a constructed form of the consent can be fake. That you can have false consciousness. The ad wizards can convince you want things that you really don't want, but they basically tricked you. And so, for those of us that believe in liberty, our mechanism for social change is persuasion. So how, from your perspective and your experience, and maybe some of your encounters with 3-letter agencies, how should I, in this modern age, as a person watching the two of us talk and elsewhere, understand persuasion as good, as necessary, and as sometimes trying to manipulate me in ways that I don't fully understand or that I don't want to be manipulated in that way? Help me navigate a world of constant persuasion, some of which by nefarious actors that are trying to nudge me and tweak me to do things I really aren't in my interests.
Right. Operators are standing by now, John. Yeah, got a call right now. Right. So when we were funded by DARPA, there was a very noble intent for this work. It's called Narrative Networks. People can find this online, which was equip warfighters with a new tool called persuasion to use words rather than weapons to encourage people to cooperate with U.S. goals. I think that's extremely noble. Every 6 months in that program, we had a required in-person session with a bioethicist talking about the ethics of persuasion. And I subsequently started a company that developed this software that anybody can use to measure how effectively this is getting into your brain and how persuasive it is. We as a company do not sell to governments, to political parties. We don't sell in a number of countries that are communist, for example. We don't sell in China. And so I think we should be really careful with these tools. But if this is like what's this notion of advertising puffery, right? As an advertiser, it's not illegal for me to say, the best product ever made, because it's puffery. We know that you're extending that. I think we don't know that from the government perspective. We don't expect the government, like with COVID times, to engage in puffery.
Yeah.
And so I think, that Schellenberger, Taibbi, these guys are doing, again, God's work to reveal all this. So I think that's where transparency comes in. I think we're always trying to persuade each other. I have a software company. I'm trying to persuade people to subscribe to and use our software. Now I'm hoping that solves a problem, and it's a win-win. You pay me, but I solve a problem for you. There's no problem with that. If I'm doing it in some covert way where you're not aware that I'm selling you something, I think that would be wrong. If you're coerced, that's wrong. If you have diminished capacity, that's wrong. You're a child, or you're not cognitively intact. My university was, the universities are always fundraising, and they had a donor, longtime donor who you can kind of see became cognitively declined, and they just stopped talking to her. Like, she actually is, I don't think, not making good decisions. She's made big gifts over the years, and we just said, hey, we think we shouldn't talk to her anymore. I think that's the right ethical thing to do.
Yeah, that's good.
Right?
That's good to hear.
And also legally, like imagine her family figures out she made a whatever $50 million gift, and like, yeah, she was demented. And I'm like, okay, you got to give it back. It's a big deal. So don't do that. So yeah, I think I as a human being, and I think we as a society should think about the ethics of persuasion, and yet we are doing it all the time. Right? I'm going to take a walk after this, John, get some fresh air. And if I see a dog, I'm going to go pet it. I'm not going to kick it. I'm going to pet it because I want it to like me and I don't know, would play with me or something. Right? So I'm persuading that dog.
Yeah.
Is that wrong?
Is there a outside of the more obviously extreme cases where you've got bad actors that are either trying to, push you for political ends, or even sort of the, a lot most the big vector for getting hacked is not software, it's social engineering.
People.
It's people.
Right.
Which essentially is one version of nefarious persuasion. Where would you say is the, if you were going to give a young adult who's in this massive information landscape of all the messages that they get on their phone and in school and everywhere else, is there a short list of just little checks like, okay, let me just think through, I got this message, let me just check it against my checklist for whether or not this might not be in my best interest. Mm-hmm. What would be your advice for that?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that by using a short story, which is I was in Denver 2 weeks ago to give a talk called Trust in Science, which they leaned on me to give. And it's a public, and I said, let me tell you what scientists do. We don't trust science at all. We trust a scientific method in which you have replication, extension, you have a convergent set of information. So I think the same thing happens to individuals. If it seems like it's too good to be true, it probably is. As I said earlier, sleep on it. Ask your friends, get advice before you make any serious decision. If it's, again, you're buying laundry detergent, who cares? It's fine. That's a low cost mistake. But I think, getting that, there was this research on remember this show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Mm-hmm. And you have 3 lifelines. The best one always is to poll the audience. That's the consensus view. And that's the way science works. And I think if it's a complicated decision, get advice, find out, not from your one stupid friend who's, I don't know, smoking pot all day. Ask a bunch of people and get some feedback and try to make a thoughtful decision. If it's a rush decision, it's probably not a good one. Unless you're playing strategy, right? So if I want to, I bought an expensive new car when I sold a book some years ago. I took my daughter with me. I went at the end of the month. I knew they had sale. And I just burned like 2 hours with this guy. And then I said, oh, my kid's hungry. I got to go. All of a sudden, we got a deal really fast. So, I want to be a good persuader. I got a good deal on this car. Now, I went back to the dealer for years and years and paid for their overpriced service. And, they still made money on me. But I said, I'll just pay you cash list and then we're good to go. So again, I want to be a good persuader in my best interest. Now, it's still voluntary. They didn't have to sell that car to me.
Yeah.
But did I want to, save a couple $1,000s by being strategic? For sure.
One of the things that I think, so that's such good advice to don't rush important decisions and don't rush important conclusions. If something is important and you hear a piece of information, don't rush, don't jump to conclusions so fast. What about fear? We are, especially when it comes to stuff like climate change and but it doesn't matter. You name the issue and you can find the leading political voices leveraging fear to try to get you to make a decision. How should I neurologically think about the way my brain operates in a state of fear?
I think the answer is going to surprise you. Research from my lab and many others that moderate fear improves decision makings, where let's say physiologic arousal. You just don't care. You're not going to put any, again, we talked about the cognitive energy you need to make good decisions. Too much fear, not good. So this kind of inverted U curve you see everywhere in biology. So I've got to be sufficiently activated to actually be for the organism to devote the metabolic resources to making a good decision. And these, particularly we've got research we just submitted to a journal recently on decision making is under risk.
Mhm.
So these are risky decisions. They involve money, and it turns out that if you stress people moderately, better decision making. Too much stress, bad. Now I'm sucked up all your cognitive load, and you can't. And too little, actually, not as good. You think, well, if I'm super relaxed, I can make decisions. But again, emotions are how we say things are important. So fear is processed as an emotion, like, oh, I'm a little fearful of this. Now I got to put some energy into it. As opposed to, do you want a good Italian or Mexican for dinner? I don't really care. I could care less.
You're right. That is surprising. I mean, so what constitutes, is there a simple way to think about where you shift from being in a moderate state of like alert, like, hey, I got to decide if I'm going to buy this house. Am I going to sign the contract? I'm a little afraid that I can't afford it, or that it's not the right house for us, or whatever, or maybe there's going to be problems that come up that I'm going to have to pay for. Any homeowners experience fear in every part of that process.
Right.
Where does that fear? Is there a way to think about when the fear shifts into being so extreme that now it's clouding my judgment for my own interests?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I remember buying my first house and my palms were sweaty. I was using like all my money for the 20% down. Like, oh, I'm like, oh, geez, if this goes south, something happens, I'm kind of in trouble. Um, yeah, so it's when you, the term of art is perseverate. So when you just can't stop thinking about it, you're just obsessing on this, you're too far over. If you can't sleep, you're too far over. You're up all night. I just can't get. Then you got to take a break, walk away. It's not a good thing. Relax. Again, if it's where we're going for dinner, generally not that important. So a little bit of sweat in the palms, a little bit of arousal level, like you're energized. But yeah, if you can't sleep, you can't think, you're over the top. Walk away. It's not good for you.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about that, because I think all of us who've lived a decent amount of time have been there, where you're and can look back on those moments and realize that it wasn't as big a deal as you were obsessing about. I'm one of the ones I'm thinking about too is the relationships. What's gonna. I remember the times where I was really worried about a relationship, like when I was single and in college. That relationship wasn't very good. And I was like working myself into a frenzy about this relationship, and it didn't last. And it was like, oh, why did that happen? And that was probably not a good sign that I was that worked up.
There's a wonderful book by the famous kind of celebrity bodyguard Gavin De Becker called "The Gift of Fear." And the point of that is that listen to your body, right? Your brain, your body are talking to each other, and you'll get this somatic feedback that if it's too much, listen to what your body's telling you, right? It's a real gift. It keeps you safe. And if you can't, it's a person or a thing, or you got to step away, get some perspective. And if it's meant to be, like relationships, if it's meant to be, I don't know about you and your wife, but
Yeah.
I've been married twice. But both times I broke up. Like I wasn't sure, and then you go, oh, you have some perspective. Like, okay, this probably is a good match for me. So, anyway, I don't know if you broke up, but that perspective is helpful, I think.
I as before we come to a close, you've referenced your company and your app. So just for the audience, lay out what it is. Maybe it's for them. It's a good chance to just plug what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's a free app. It's called Six, S-I-X. You can get the app on the Play Store. The website is your6.com. And it actually just gives you a goal, which is 6 high-value moments neurologically per day to thrive. The data are private to you. No one sees it. And you'll learn about yourself and your own preferences. And those will evolve over time, as we said. So, John, I have very modest goals. I want 1 billion people on the planet to use our free app in the next 3 years so that we have a language and a way to measure emotional fitness, right? And we need that friction, as you said. We need to actually have a little friction in our life, do something that's a little unusual where I'm investing that metabolic energy to grow my capacity to be emotionally open, to have new experiences and really thrive in life. So thank you so much.
Um, I ask this question of every guest. You know, the show is called Dad Saves America because I think it's a role we play as men that's really high impact for the world, starting with our family, starting with our kids, and then rippling out through our choices, through how we model ourselves for our kids and what they do when they go out there. How do you think about broadly, maybe as a dad, maybe as something else, your role in the American story?
Gosh, what a great question. Um, I think of myself as a contributor, right? I want to contribute to my family's happiness, my family's safety, my family's income. I want to contribute knowledge and products to the world that make people live, help people live happier lives. Um, Contribute as a thought leader, like you are. Um, so I think if we think ourselves as contributors, then um, we are humble about our value, which is no more important than anybody else, but it continue to make value on the planet. So, um, yeah, I think, is that okay? Can I be a contributor?
I think you already are, and God bless you for wanting that to be the contribution. So, Paul Zak, thanks for being on Dad Saves America.
Let's save some more America dads.